In the luxurious hotel room nestled in the heart of the magnificent city of Paris, the golden light cast delicate shadows on the exquisitely decorated walls, creating an ambiance that was both warm and unfamiliar. The curtains swayed gently with the evening breeze drifting in from the balcony, carrying the subtle fragrance of lilacs mixed with the quiet whispers of the night. Catherine Evans opened her eyes, feeling the warmth enveloping her. She could hear the steady rhythm of a heartbeat beside her, strong and unwavering. She was nestled in the arms of David Sterling, the man she had sworn to destroy. His breath tickled her hair, and his strong arm draped naturally around her waist, as if they had belonged together for a long time. She shifted slightly, revealing the soft curve of her bare shoulder. The crumpled sheets barely covered their bodies, undeniable traces of the night they had shared, a night she had meticulously planned, a night she thought she would control entirely. But now, as everything had unfolded, Catherine found her heart heavier than ever. She remembered everything vividly, the way his eyes darkened under the influence of the wine, the way his touch ignited something deep within her, and the way his breath mingled with his husky whispers against her ear. It had all been too real, too gentle, too genuine. Catherine bit her lip, gripping the edge of the blanket tightly. She couldn't allow herself to soften, couldn't forget the real reason she was here. David Sterling was not a tender lover. He was the enemy she had spent 4 years despising. This man with his perfect exterior and captivating smile was the one she believed had driven her family to ruin, stripping them of everything she held dear. She had orchestrated everything with precision, from slipping the harmless sedative into David's wine to leading him effortlessly back to the room. It was all part of the plan, but what she hadn't accounted for was the rising guilt gnawing at her from within. Turning her head slightly, Catherine glanced at David. Under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, his face looked unusually peaceful and serene. His brows were slightly furrowed, as if even in sleep, his mind was burdened with complexities. David was a powerful businessman, a man who always knew what he wanted and how to achieve it. Yet in this moment, he appeared nothing more than an ordinary man, vulnerable and fragile, just like anyone else. Catherine clenched her fists, forcing herself to move away from the bed. But as she began to shift, a husky voice sounded behind her. "Catherine, where are you going?" She froze. David's voice, deep and commanding as always, carried an unexpected gentleness that made her hesitate to turn around. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself and replied in a calm voice, "I just need a glass of water." David reached out, pulling her back gently, his half-lidded gaze filled with an unmistakable possessiveness. "Stay," he whispered, burying his face in her soft hair, as if afraid to let go of something fragile. Catherine closed her eyes, willing herself to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. She couldn't afford to let emotions cloud her judgment. Revenge was still the priority, and no amount of tenderness from David Sterling could change that reality. "We need to talk about this." David's voice broke the silence, tinged with quiet determination. Catherine opened her eyes, and for a fleeting moment, a thought crossed her mind. If he was truly the one who destroyed my family, then why is he capable of such gentleness? The internal conflict between love and hatred began to seep into her thoughts, making Catherine realize that this plan was far more complicated than she had ever anticipated. Hello, Soul Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stories to be a part of this community. You're more than subscribers, you're family. Your presence means the world to me. Let's continue this journey together. Catherine Evans once had a perfect life, a happy family, and a promising career. She was the only daughter of Robert Evans, the chairman of Evans Industries, a leading corporation in real estate and green technology. She grew up surrounded by the love of her parents and the respect of those around her, but everything crumbled in the blink of an eye. 3 years ago, Evans Industries unexpectedly went bankrupt after a series of relentless crises. Key projects were canceled, partners withdrew one after another, and the stock value plummeted uncontrollably. Rumors of financial misconduct spread rapidly, pushing the company to the brink of ruin. The company's collapse was not just a financial loss. It destroyed Catherine's family. Her father, who had always taken great pride in his career, suffered a fatal heart attack right in his office. Her mother, devastated by his sudden death, fell into despair and passed away not long after. Catherine was consumed by pain and hatred when she discovered that all signs pointed to David Sterling, the chairman of Sterling Enterprises. She believed that he had manipulated the market, using underhanded tactics to turn Evans Industries partners against her father and ultimately forcing the company into bankruptcy. From that moment on, Catherine set her sights on a single goal: revenge. Not wanting to take the case to court, knowing that legal action wouldn't be enough to make David pay the price, Catherine decided to destroy him from within. She meticulously planned to infiltrate Sterling Enterprises, gather evidence of the company's illegal activities, and expose David, leaving him with no way out. After honing her skills and acquiring the necessary knowledge, Catherine applied to Sterling Enterprises. With an impressive resume and solid experience, she easily passed the selection process and became David's senior assistant, a position that demanded absolute trust. She excelled in every task assigned to her. From handling crucial contracts to strategizing key business plans, Catherine managed everything flawlessly. Gradually, she gained not only David's trust, but also the confidence of his inner circle. Yet despite her efforts over the course of a year, Catherine found no evidence of wrongdoing within the company. Every document was tightly secured, and the security systems were too stringent for her to penetrate. Frustration grew within her, but she refused to give up. If she couldn't find evidence through the company's systems, she decided to search through David himself. She realized that to gain deeper access, she needed David to trust her completely, and the quickest way to achieve that was through intimacy. The perfect opportunity arrived when Catherine was assigned to accompany David on a business trip to Paris for an important project discussion. This was the ideal chance for her to take the next step in her plan. At an upscale restaurant in Paris, under the glimmering lights and soft melodies, David offered Catherine a glass of expensive wine. She had prepared a mild sedative in advance, discreetly slipping it into his drink when he wasn't looking. "Paris is beautiful, isn't it?" David swirled his glass, his eyes filled with excitement. "It's stunning," Catherine replied with a smile. But in her mind, there was only one thought: to gain his trust. After a few drinks, David began to lose his focus. His gaze grew hazy, and his voice deepened. Seizing the moment, Catherine skillfully helped him back to the hotel room she had prepared in advance. And what was bound to happen, happened. They spent the night together. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the grand windows, David awoke with a slightly dazed expression, but soon a faint smile crossed his lips. "I don't remember everything from last night, but I want to take responsibility," he said. Catherine stared at him, surprised by his unexpected sincerity. She had anticipated a different reaction, perhaps aloofness or even detachment, like she had always imagined him to be. But no, he wasn't like that. This was a mistake. Catherine tried to keep her voice calm, but David looked at her with a seriousness she hadn't expected. "Mistake or not, Catherine, I don't want this to end here." His words made her heart waver. David wasn't the ruthless, cold-hearted man she had believed him to be. There was something gentle, sincere, and caring about him, something she had never imagined. However, Catherine held on to her resolve. She couldn't let emotions interfere with her mission. She smiled, hiding the turmoil within. "Let's just forget this happened," she said, quickly gathering her things to leave, avoiding David's gaze. As the door closed behind her, Catherine reminded herself, this was just a step in the plan, nothing more. But what she didn't realize was that this very moment had laid the foundation for the cracks forming within her heart. Upon returning from the business trip, Catherine noticed that David had become more attentive to her. He gave her tender looks, subtle yet genuine gestures of care that slowly made her feel lost between her plan and her emotions. She had always believed that David Sterling was an emotionless, ruthless, and ambitious man, someone willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. But as she worked at the company and spent more time with him, she gradually discovered a different truth, one that shook her resolve. Every morning, David was the first to arrive at the office, bringing a steaming cup of coffee and wearing his usual calm smile. He wasn't just a powerful businessman, he was a dedicated leader. He remembered every employee's name, even their smallest preferences, the friendly greetings, the way his gaze lingered with concern when someone looked exhausted, or simply the way he listened attentively to even the smallest suggestions. All of it confused Catherine more and more. He's just good at pretending. A two-faced man, Catherine thought as she watched David standing by the window, gazing out at the bustling streets below. But the man before her now was completely different from the villain she had imagined. One day while Catherine was sorting through a chaotic pile of documents on her desk, David unexpectedly appeared beside her, holding a cup of green tea. "You're overworking yourself," he said, placing the tea down. "Take a break. I don't want my employees to burn out." Catherine looked at the cup, feeling a strange warmth inside. It wasn't the superficial concern of a boss for his subordinate. It was real sincerity. She had seen David help a junior employee resolve personal issues, taking the time to listen without showing any impatience. On another occasion, she watched him patiently guide an intern through fixing a financial report. These small acts gradually led Catherine to realize that David might not be as ruthless as she had once thought. A fraud wouldn't treat his employees this way, she told herself, but at the same time, her rational mind warned that it could all be an elaborate facade to conceal his true nature. As David's assistant, Catherine had the opportunity to be closer to him than anyone else. Their intense meetings often ended with David cracking a joke or two, lightening the atmosphere. Once, during a late-night work session, David unexpectedly opened up about his struggles when he first took over Sterling Enterprises. "No one believed I could do it," he said, his eyes distant. "They thought I was just another rich kid born into a powerful family. But I had to prove myself every step of the way." Catherine listened in silence, unsure of how to respond. His story felt too raw, too real, not the kind of deception she had always assumed he thrived on. Day by day, Catherine began to realize that David wasn't just an ambitious businessman. He was a person with genuine emotions. He didn't exploit his power to manipulate others, as she had once believed. Instead, he led with determination and loyalty to the company he had built. Catherine's growing doubts were fueled further by conversations she overheard in the company. "Our boss is truly a good man," a colleague said during a coffee break. "He's always fair and has never exploited anyone for his success." Catherine forced a smile, but inside, she was filled with turmoil. She had come here with one goal, to destroy David's career. But now, after hearing such words and witnessing his actions firsthand, she started doubting herself. Could I have been wrong? Each night when she returned home, Catherine found herself trapped in an emotional whirlwind. The image of her father collapsing to the floor the day Evans Industries crumbled haunted her. The memory of her mother fading away in grief replayed over and over in her mind. But at the same time, she couldn't shake off the tenderness in David's gestures, the man she had believed to be her sworn enemy. She wondered if the person she sought revenge against was truly the culprit behind her family's downfall. Or had she been caught in a spiral of hatred she could no longer escape? During a meeting, David's gaze briefly met hers. It wasn't the look of a deceiver, but one of sincerity and trust. Catherine quickly lowered her eyes, avoiding his gaze, feeling her heart racing in confusion. But then she reminded herself firmly, "Whether he's a good man or not, I cannot forget my original purpose." She forced herself to stay focused on her revenge, to follow through with her plan. Yet the chaos in her heart grew stronger with each passing day, becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Catherine's revenge plan was progressing with growing impatience. Despite securing the position of David Sterling's senior assistant, a role that granted her access to vital information within the corporation, nothing seemed as easy as she had imagined. Sterling Enterprises' security system was exceptionally tight. All crucial files were encrypted with multiple layers of security. Every transaction was monitored by a top-tier legal team, ensuring absolute transparency and strict compliance with the law. Catherine had attempted several times to breach David's office, but there were no loose ends. Confidential meetings took place in highly secure rooms, And even though she was present, everything discussed appeared to be entirely legal business strategies. The more she observed, the more confused she became. There was not a single sign of wrongdoing within Sterling Enterprises. Everything was too smooth, too transparent, almost suspiciously so. David Sterling, the man she believed had ruined her family, seemed to be an exceptional leader, decisive, visionary, and ethical. He always made precise, calculated decisions with no trace of deceit or manipulation. In meetings with shareholders, he displayed absolute transparency and confidence. Employees respected and trusted him implicitly. Catherine began to feel trapped. Her plan of revenge was at a dead end. There were no flaws, no irregularities to exploit. She wondered if she had been mistaken from the start. Could it be David wasn't the one who destroyed my family? A whirlwind of emotions began to cloud Catherine's mind. Every time she faced David, she couldn't deny that he was a compelling man. Brilliant, charismatic, yet kind and attentive. He always listened to his employees and was willing to step in when needed. Catherine tried to dismiss the doubts creeping into her thoughts, but her heart wavered. But if David wasn't responsible, then who was? Just as Catherine found herself on the brink of failure, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. One late afternoon as she was leaving the office, a mysterious message popped up on her phone screen. If you want to take down David Sterling, meet me. We share the same goal. Catherine frowned, suspicion mixing with curiosity. After careful investigation, she discovered that the message was from Blackwood Corporation, Sterling Enterprises' biggest rival. That evening in a secluded restaurant, Catherine found herself face-to-face with Richard Blackwood, the ruthless and cunning CEO of Blackwood Corporation. His calculating gaze pierced through her as if he could see all her secrets. "Catherine Evans," Richard said, his voice smooth yet laced with authority, "I know why you're at Sterling Enterprises." Catherine maintained a calm facade, though her heart pounded. "And if I say I don't know what you're implying?" she countered. Richard smirked, shaking his head. "Don't waste my time. I have what you need, evidence to bring down David Sterling." Her breath hitched. "You have proof?" "Exactly." Richard pushed a thick folder across the table. "But in return, I need you to do something important." Catherine opened the folder, revealing documents filled with suspicious financial transactions, the very evidence she had been searching for but never found within Sterling Enterprises. Yet something about it felt off. "I want you to plant these documents in Sterling Enterprises' system," Richard continued, his tone smooth but commanding, "in both David's office and his private residence." Catherine's blood ran cold. This was never part of her plan. She had intended to uncover the truth, not fabricate it. "You're the only person close enough to pull this off," Richard pressed on. "No one else can access those areas without raising suspicion." Catherine closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was her chance, to avenge her parents and restore Evans Industries. Yet a nagging feeling of unease refused to leave her mind. "And if I refuse?" she asked, challenging him. Richard shrugged. "I don't think you have another choice. If you miss this opportunity, there won't be another. But if you succeed, Evans Industries could reclaim its reputation. Your parents' suffering won't be in vain." His words pierced through her like a dagger. She had come too far to turn back now. But was this truly the right path? Returning to her apartment, Catherine sat silently at her desk, staring at the documents Richard had given her hands trembling. If she planted these documents, David would be destroyed. There would be no coming back. But if she went through with it, wouldn't she become no different from those who had ruined her own family? Outside, the night sky darkened with looming storm clouds, just like the internal battle waging within Catherine. Today, Catherine sat silently on the bathroom chair, her eyes fixed on the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines appeared clearly. There was no room for doubt. Her breath caught in her chest and her heart pounded so hard that she felt it might shatter. She was pregnant. The memories of that night in Paris came rushing back. David's deep eyes, his gentle smile, and the warmth he exuded were still vivid in her mind. That night she had thought it was merely a step in her revenge plan, a trap she had carefully set to gain his trust. But now the consequences had spiraled beyond her control. Catherine shakily stood up and walked slowly to the window. The pale afternoon light cast a faint glow on her face, making her look even more drained. Her hand instinctively rested on her stomach, and an unfamiliar feeling crept into her heart. She was carrying David's child. A wave of fear surged through her. She had spent years planning her revenge, determined to bring David Sterling to justice as the man who destroyed her family. But this child, an innocent life, untouched by vengeance or schemes. Catherine shook her head fiercely, trying to banish the weakness creeping into her thoughts. She couldn't let this derail her plan. She recalled the image of her father collapsing onto the floor, clutching his chest in agony, and the haunted look in her mother's eyes as she withered away from the grief. Those memories had never faded from her mind. No matter how kind, caring, or trustworthy David appeared to be, he was still the head of Sterling Enterprises, the company she believed had buried her family in ruin. She couldn't let personal feelings interfere. Catherine clenched her fist tightly, guilt coiling inside her chest, but she pushed it aside. This child would not change the course she had chosen. "I have to stay focused on my plan," she whispered to herself, as if to reaffirm her resolve. She stepped out of the bathroom and looked into the large mirror hanging on the wall. The reflection staring back at her was a far cry from the Catherine of the past. No longer the innocent girl who once believed in goodness, but a woman standing on the precipice between love and vengeance. "David Sterling will pay, even if it costs me my own heart." With trembling hands, she hid the pregnancy test away, as if concealing the very truth she had just discovered. The following days, the storm within Catherine. The days that followed were filled with an unbearable tension. Catherine continued with her work as if nothing had changed, but inside she was caught in a whirlwind of emotions with no escape. Every time David passed by her in the office hallway, his gaze lingered on her a little longer, his smile softer and more sincere. Every small gesture of concern, whether it was a subtle touch on her shoulder or a thoughtful inquiry about her workload, made Catherine feel as though she was betraying not just him, but herself. Yet Catherine refused to let herself falter. Whenever her emotions swelled, she reminded herself of her original goal, to destroy David and reclaim justice for her parents. She maintained her professional demeanor, cold, composed, and efficient. But inside, the battle raged. Morning sickness hit her at the most inconvenient times, forcing her to excuse herself from meetings under false pretenses. She meticulously concealed her fatigue, ensuring no one suspected a thing. But in those moments of vulnerability, a haunting question gnawed at her heart. Is all of this truly worth it? What if David isn't the one who caused Evans Industries to collapse? The more time she spent around him, witnessing his dedication and the impeccable decisions he made, the more doubts crept into her mind. David didn't seem like the type of man who would resort to underhanded tactics to crush a competitor. And what frightened her most was the undeniable truth. Somewhere along the way, she had started feeling something for him. One late evening, Catherine found herself lingering in the office long after everyone else had left. She stood by the large glass window overlooking the city skyline, lost in thought. She pressed a hand to her stomach absent-mindedly, her mind replaying every moment she had spent with David. Just then, a familiar voice broke her reverie. "Catherine, you've been working too hard lately." She turned to see David standing a few feet away, his expression filled with quiet concern. He held out a cup of tea. "Here, I thought you might need this." Catherine hesitated before taking it, their fingers brushing slightly. A warmth spread through her at his touch, making it even harder to hold on to the bitterness she had carried for so long. "Thank you," she murmured, keeping her voice neutral. David studied her for a moment before speaking again. "I know I can be demanding, but if you ever need to take a break, don't hesitate to let me know." Catherine forced a small smile, but deep inside her emotions were in turmoil. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him the truth, to walk away from it all. But she couldn't. As David walked away, leaving her alone once more, Catherine let out a shaky breath. She had to remind herself why she was here. She had to finish what she started. But with every passing day, the lines between love and hatred blurred more and more. and Catherine feared that soon she might not be able to tell the difference anymore. But hatred always wins. One late evening, while sitting alone in her apartment, Catherine received a call from Richard Blackwood. "What are you waiting for, Catherine? We've provided everything you need. Don't forget why you're here." His cold voice cut through her like a blade. Catherine closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She knew she couldn't back down now, couldn't let her emotions take over. If she let this opportunity slip away, everything she had worked for would be meaningless. "I know," she replied firmly. "I'll get it done." Hanging up, Catherine stared out at the night sky through the window, her eyes gradually hardening with resolve. She would see this plan through, no matter how heavy the guilt weighed on her heart. She reminded herself that this child growing inside her wouldn't change anything. Everything she was doing was for her parents, for the Evans family's honor. Not for David Sterling, and not for anyone else. Yet deep down, she knew the path ahead was no longer as simple as she once believed. She was carrying the child of the man she had sworn to destroy. The man who had somehow managed to stir emotions she thought she had buried long ago. In the past few days, Catherine couldn't hide the exhaustion slowly consuming her. Morning sickness, the constant stress of her revenge plan, and the fear of her growing secret weighed heavily on her, making it harder to focus at work. She felt her legs growing heavier as she walked through the grand corridors of Sterling Enterprises. Despite her efforts to maintain a composed exterior, David had begun to notice the changes in her. One morning, as Catherine stood at her desk, eyes glazed over the numbers on the screen but unable to focus, David's deep voice startled her from behind. "You're not okay." He stood there, arms crossed, his sharp blue eyes watching her with concern. Catherine stiffened, quickly adjusting her posture and forcing a faint smile. "I'm fine, just a little overwhelmed with work." David wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, setting a warm cup of herbal tea on her desk. "Work pressure? Or are you simply neglecting yourself?" His voice was gentle yet firm. "Catherine, you've lost weight, and I've noticed you're distracted more often. If you need time off, I can arrange it." Catherine stared at the tea, feeling the warmth seeping through her fingertips. His concern, though she knew it stemmed from his naturally caring nature, made her heart waver. This wasn't the image of a ruthless man who had destroyed her family. This was someone who cared, perhaps too much. She bit her lip, the turmoil inside her growing stronger. She wished for a fleeting moment that things could be different, that she wasn't trapped in this web of revenge, that she could accept his kindness without hesitation. But reality was far from those wishes. She looked up at him, meeting his gentle gaze, and nodded softly. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I'll take better care of myself." Her voice was low, carrying an unspoken weight. David didn't press further, but throughout the day his watchful eyes followed her every move. He quietly reduced her workload, checked in on her whenever he had the chance, and even personally ordered lunch to be delivered to her office. Each small act of kindness felt like a stab to her conscience, making it harder to breathe under the weight of her deception. That night, alone in her silent apartment, Catherine sat on the couch, cradling her still flat stomach. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered to the empty room. If only things were different. If only there was no revenge, no hatred. Could we have been happy? But the answer never came. With a heavy heart, she wiped away her tears, forcing herself to suppress the growing emotions inside her. She had come too far to turn back now. Yet David's gentle actions had unknowingly carved their way into her heart, making it more fragile than ever before. Late at night, the Sterling Enterprises building stood silent, with only the faint glow of office lights illuminating the vast corridors. Catherine stood motionless outside David Sterling's office door, her palms clenched tightly around the USB drive containing the falsified documents provided by Blackwood Corporation. For months, working as David's executive assistant had granted her the privilege of unrestricted access to his office, an opportunity many in the company could only dream of. But tonight, she wasn't here for work. Tonight, she was here to complete the final step of her revenge plan. With a deep breath, Catherine swiped her employee card through the access reader. The door beeped softly before unlocking. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing lightly against the marble floor. Everything in the office was meticulously arranged, the shelves lined with neatly stacked business documents, the desks spotless, reflecting David's meticulous and disciplined nature. She approached the desk, her fingers trembling as she pulled open the drawer where David kept his most crucial files. With calculated precision, she extracted a few real documents and slipped the falsified ones in between, blending them seamlessly into the stack. Her hand quivered slightly as she placed the USB drive filled with fabricated data into his private compartment. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She had always imagined she would feel triumphant at this point, yet all she felt now was an overwhelming sense of emptiness. David's face flashed through her mind, his warm smile when he gently told her to take a break after working late, the way his eyes softened with trust whenever he entrusted her with critical projects. Every small gesture of kindness had slowly chipped away at her resolve. Catherine let out a shaky sigh, hesitation flickering in her eyes. Just one more step, and it will all be over, she whispered to herself, trying to silence the nagging doubts creeping in. Yet deep down, another voice whispered louder. If David truly is the ruthless man you believe him to be, why does he care so much for you? She shook her head violently, forcing those thoughts away. Now was not the time to waver. With steely determination, she meticulously restored everything to its original place, ensuring not a single trace of her intrusion remained. Taking one final look around the office, she turned and walked out, leaving behind only the suffocating weight of guilt growing heavier with each step she took. The next morning, the atmosphere at Sterling Enterprises was tenser than ever. A team of financial auditors had unexpectedly arrived to inspect the company's records, sending a wave of unease through the office. Employees whispered anxiously among themselves, their faces clouded with concern. But David remained as calm and composed as always, his expression unreadable. From her desk, Catherine watched him closely. Even though she was the one who had orchestrated this entire situation, she couldn't ignore the pang of guilt that stabbed through her chest as she saw David being questioned and scrutinized. He handled the pressure with unwavering poise, answering inquiries with a quiet confidence that only made her guilt grow heavier. Their eyes met across the room. Catherine's heart clenched. If he knew she was the one who betrayed him, would his gaze still hold that same warmth? That evening, while the company was still in turmoil, Catherine found herself once again inside David's office, searching through his files. She needed to know how far the investigation had progressed and whether the fabricated evidence had been discovered. As she rummaged through his neatly organized drawers, her eyes caught on an old worn file labeled Evans Industries, Internal Report. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she hesitantly opened it. What she read made the world around her blur into nothingness. Sterling Enterprises attempted to propose a financial rescue plan for Evans Industries, but was obstructed and shut down by external forces. Verified evidence of Blackwood's market manipulation that led to the collapse of Evans Industries. Catherine's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, the truth screaming at her from the yellowed sheets of paper. David wasn't the one who had destroyed her family. It had been Blackwood all along. They had orchestrated the downfall, planting misleading evidence to make her believe that Sterling Enterprises was responsible. A sob escaped her lips as the crushing realization settled over her. Everything she had believed for years, the hatred that had consumed her, had all been built on a lie. Catherine recalled the times David had mentioned her family's company, the way his eyes had softened, filled not with indifference or gloating, but with regret and concern. He had never sought to harm her family. In fact, he had tried to help, silently without seeking recognition. She stumbled back, the weight of her mistake pressing down on her chest like a ton of bricks. "I was wrong," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks, blurring her vision. Back at her desk, Catherine sat motionless, staring blankly at the documents in front of her. The life growing inside her, the undeniable connection she felt toward David. Everything had been clouded by a vendetta born from deception, and now she had put the very man she had come to care for in jeopardy. The remorse was suffocating. She had to make things right. But how? Would David ever forgive her? And more importantly, how could she stand against Blackwood, knowing they wouldn't let her betrayal go unpunished? Catherine inhaled sharply, wiping away her tears, and stood up with renewed resolve. She had no other choice but to confess everything to David. It was the only way to undo the damage she had caused. Catherine stood frozen outside David's office, her hands cold despite the warmth of the building. She knew that this moment would change everything, shattering the carefully built walls she had maintained for so long. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. David was standing by the window, the golden hues of the evening sun casting a glow on his broad shoulders. He turned at the sound of the door, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers with a hint of surprise. "Catherine?" His deep voice was calm but laced with curiosity. "Is something wrong?" She swallowed hard, her feet feeling like they were rooted to the floor. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to bury the truth like she had done so many times before. But today wasn't a day for running. "David," her voice trembled, "I need to talk to you." He gestured for her to sit, but Catherine remained standing, clutching her handbag as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Slowly, she stepped toward his desk and placed a thick folder onto the polished wood. This is the truth," she said hoarsely, "about me and about Blackwood." David's gaze flickered to the folder, his expression unreadable as he read the bold letters on the cover. Then his eyes locked onto hers and she felt the weight of his scrutiny like never before. "What do you mean?" His voice was steady, but she could hear the tension lurking beneath. Catherine drew a shaky breath, biting her lip before finally meeting his eyes. "I didn't come to your company to work. I came here for revenge." The silence that followed was suffocating. David stood motionless, his stare unwavering and cold. Yet Catherine could sense the storm brewing beneath his composed exterior. "Revenge?" he repeated, his tone dangerously low. She nodded, the tears welling up in her eyes but refusing to fall. "I believed you were the one who destroyed my family, that you orchestrated the downfall of Evans Industries and caused my father's heart attack. I came here to find evidence to ruin you." David remained still, his gaze piercing through her, as if trying to decipher every unspoken word. The weight of her confession bore down on her like a heavy chain, making it hard to breathe. "I planted fake documents in your office," she admitted, her voice cracking under the strain. "Blackwood used me, but I realized the truth too late. They're the ones who sabotaged my family, and now they've orchestrated this investigation to bring you down." David's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. His face was devoid of emotion, but the disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. He picked up the folder, flipping through the pages with a careful, deliberate motion. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. Catherine swallowed against the lump in her throat. "Since the day I walked into your office for the first time." She braced herself for his anger, for the storm she was certain would come. She deserved his wrath, deserved every word of condemnation he could throw at her. But instead, David simply stared at her, his expression reflecting a deep, quiet pain. "I trusted you, Catherine," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never once thought you would betray me." Her tears finally spilled over, landing soundlessly onto the desk. "I had no choice. But I was wrong," she whispered brokenly. David turned away, walking back toward the window, his shoulders heavy with the weight of her betrayal. The lights of the city glittered below, oblivious to the turmoil within this room. "Do you know what hurts the most, Catherine?" he asked, his voice distant but laced with raw vulnerability. "I'm not even angry. I'm just disappointed." His words hit her harder than any accusation ever could. "I won't turn you over to the authorities," David continued, his tone quieter now. "But from this moment on, you are no longer my assistant." Catherine nodded, her sobs barely contained. "I understand." She turned and walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. As the door clicked shut behind her, she leaned against the wall outside, her eyes staring blankly down the long corridor. Inside the office, David stood still, gazing out at the city skyline. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had begun to care for, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. And yet he couldn't bring himself to hate her. But trust once broken, could it ever truly be restored? After a sleepless night, Catherine stood outside David's office, her hands tightly gripping the USB containing all the evidence against Blackwood. Her heart pounded in her chest, partly out of fear, partly because she knew this moment would decide everything. Whether she could redeem herself or live in regret and lose David forever. Taking a deep breath, she knocked lightly and stepped inside. David was sitting behind his desk, his cold gaze sweeping over her. "What do you want?" His voice was low, devoid of the warmth it once held. Catherine slowly approached, placing the USB on his desk, her eyes resolute. "I have something you need to see." David glanced at the USB, then back at Catherine, crossing his arms. "What do you want from me this time, Catherine? Another chance to deceive me?" She shook her head, her voice trembling but firm. "No, David, I want to make amends. This contains all the evidence of what Blackwood has done. Not just to you, but to my family. They destroyed Evans Industries, and I almost helped them ruin Sterling Enterprises." David's face remained emotionless, but his eyes bore into hers as if searching for the truth. "How can I trust you after everything you've done?" Catherine swallowed hard, her eyes red but filled with determination. "Let me prove it. I'm willing to stand as a witness. Before the public, before the law, I'll reveal the truth. And if you never want to see me again, I'll leave your life." A heavy silence filled the room. David stared deeply into her eyes as if searching for any sign of deceit, but all he found was sincerity and remorse. Finally, he sighed, picked up the USB, and plugged it into his laptop. The documents loaded, fabricated contracts, bribery emails, and shady transactions linked to Blackwood. David's sharp gaze flickered with surprise as he scanned through the files. He looked up, his voice rough. "Are you sure you want to do this? Do you understand the danger? Blackwood won't let this slide. And more than that, you'll face public scrutiny. Are you ready for that?" Catherine nodded without hesitation. "I have nothing left to lose." David remained silent for a long moment before nodding. "All right, we'll hold a press conference." Catherine exhaled deeply, a weight lifting from her chest that had been suffocating her for far too long. 2 days later, the press conference. The press room at Sterling Enterprises was packed with media representatives. Flashbulbs flickered, and journalists murmured in anticipation of the mysterious announcement the company had promised. David stepped onto the stage, his demeanor calm yet commanding, his gaze sharp. Beside him, Catherine stood tall in an elegant yet composed outfit, her expression resolute. Holding the microphone, David's voice resonated through the hall. "Today, we are here to uncover a long-hidden truth. Blackwood Corporation has not only manipulated the market, but also used underhanded tactics to destroy their competitors, including Sterling Enterprises and Evans Industries." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd, and reporters frantically took notes and snapped pictures. Catherine took a deep breath, stepping forward and gripping the microphone with slightly trembling hands but a steady voice. "I am Catherine Evans, former senior assistant to Mr. David Sterling. I was deceived and manipulated by Blackwood, who exploited my desire for revenge. They promised me justice, and I blindly believed their lies. But the truth is, Blackwood was the one who destroyed my family, and I made a grave mistake by working with them." The entire hall fell silent for a brief moment before the room buzzed with questions. A reporter quickly asked, "Are you admitting that you were part of Blackwood's scheme? That you betrayed Sterling Enterprises?" Catherine nodded, her eyes filled with remorse. "Yes, but today, I am standing here to correct my mistake. I am willing to provide all the evidence and cooperate with the authorities to bring those responsible to justice." David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a gesture of both support and silent forgiveness. "I was betrayed," David continued, his gaze scanning the crowd. "But I believe everyone deserves a chance to make things right, and I trust Catherine." A single applause echoed through the room, hesitant at first, but soon it grew, filling the space with an overwhelming sense of acknowledgement and admiration. The audience wasn't just witnessing a press conference, they were witnessing a courageous act of redemption. Following the press conference, the authorities launched an investigation into Blackwood. The evidence provided by Catherine and David was more than enough to initiate legal proceedings against the corporation. Blackwood's shareholders began to withdraw, and within weeks the once mighty conglomerate crumbled entirely. Catherine left Sterling Enterprises immediately after the press conference. She knew that although David had forgiven her, the wound she had inflicted on him could not be erased easily. She needed time to make amends, to find herself again, and more importantly, to prepare for a new life, the life growing inside her that she had never dared to tell him about. Leaving the bustling city behind, Catherine moved to a quiet, peaceful coastal town. She rented a small apartment, lived a secluded life, and tried to forget everything that had happened. Days passed in silence as she focused on taking care of herself and the baby growing inside her. Long afternoons were spent sitting by the shore, cradling her belly, her mind filled with thoughts of David. She once thought she could forget him, but every night his image returned, the disappointment in his eyes, his warm voice, and the tender moments they had shared. Catherine realized that her love for him had never truly faded. 6 months passed, and David couldn't stop thinking about Catherine. Though he buried himself in work, his heart couldn't shake off the emptiness. He had forgiven her long ago, tried to forget her, but the longing never ceased, pushing him to search for the woman who had truly touched his heart. After weeks of searching, David finally discovered where Catherine was living. On a warm summer afternoon, he drove to the quiet coastal town, anticipation and longing swirling inside him. When he saw her from a distance, standing on the porch with her hand gently resting on her now visibly pregnant belly, David froze. She was more beautiful than ever. Her face showed signs of exhaustion, yet her eyes held a newfound glow, perhaps because of the little life growing inside her. As he approached, his eyes locked onto her belly, softly rising beneath the thin fabric of her dress. Time seemed to stand still as he reached out with trembling hands, touching it gently. His voice was hoarse with emotion. "Is this my child?" Catherine's eyes welled up with tears, unable to hide the truth any longer. She nodded slowly and tears streamed down her cheeks. David exhaled shakily, a soft, emotional smile forming on his lips. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if afraid to lose her once more. "I tried to forget you for 6 months," he whispered, his voice trembling. "But I missed you. I missed you like crazy." Catherine buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed by longing and guilt. "I'm sorry. I was too afraid to face you." David gently lifted her chin, his eyes filled with forgiveness. "You made a mistake, but it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we're here now." She sobbed in his embrace, feeling as though she had finally found her way back home. All the guilt, all the pain melted away, leaving only warmth and hope. After that emotional reunion, David held Catherine's hand tightly, his gaze unwavering. "Come back with me, Catherine. Let's start over together." Catherine looked into his eyes, still carrying a faint fear in her heart, but she knew David was the only person she could truly trust and love. She smiled through her tears and nodded, and so they returned to the city where everything had started. No more deception, no more plans of revenge, just sincerity and a desire to build a real family. Day by day, David took care of Catherine with tenderness. He accompanied her to every prenatal checkup, carefully noting the doctor's advice. Every evening, he would place his hand on her belly, listening to their baby's heartbeat with wonder. Catherine felt his love and devotion, and gradually her heart grew lighter. She learned to forgive herself and love him without barriers. Here is the English translation of your provided text. That afternoon, as the golden sunset bathed the city in a warm glow, Catherine stood on the balcony of her apartment, gently caressing her growing belly. She gazed at the distant skyline, her heart filled with emotions. The child growing inside her was proof of both love and mistakes, but above all, it was a symbol of the forgiveness David had given her. Suddenly, from behind, David's warm hands gently wrapped around her waist. His familiar warmth made her feel safer than ever. "What are you thinking about?" his deep voice whispered in her ear. Catherine smiled, leaning her head against his chest. "I'm thinking about us, about everything that happened. I can't believe how lucky I am." David held her tighter, his gaze tender but serious. "I'm the lucky one to have you and our baby." Catherine closed her eyes, savoring the peaceful moment, unaware that David had quietly stepped away. She turned around and saw him kneeling before her, a small, glistening box in his hand. Her heart skipped a beat. "Catherine Evans," David said, his eyes filled with love. "We've been through so much, and I don't want to waste another moment. You came into my life and showed me what love truly means. Let me make it up to you, protect you and our child forever. Will you marry me?" Catherine covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked at him, unable to believe what was happening. This was the man she once sought to destroy, yet he had chosen to love her, to trust and forgive her. She nodded through her sobs. "Yes, I will." David stood up, gently slipping the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his warm embrace. He kissed her forehead, right where a tear of happiness had fallen. "Thank you, David," Catherine whispered. "Thank you for your kindness and forgiveness." David lowered his forehead to hers and said softly, "You don't have to thank me, because from the moment I met you, I knew I couldn't live without you." Their wedding was held in a vast garden by the seaside, the same place Catherine once sought refuge from her past. But today it became the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Catherine wore a pristine white wedding dress, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Her belly was now visibly large, yet she radiated a gentle beauty and fulfillment. David stood under an arch adorned with white and blue flowers, the colors of the sea and sky. His expression was filled with pride and love as he watched her walk toward him. When Catherine placed her hand in his, David whispered in her ear, "You look beautiful today." She smiled, her eyes shining. "I'm the luckiest bride in the world, because I have you." The ceremony proceeded amidst the applause of friends and family. When the officiant asked Catherine if she would take David as her husband for life, she answered without hesitation, with all the sincerity in her heart, "I do." David looked at her, his gaze deep as if engraving this moment in his memory forever. "I do," he replied. They exchanged a passionate kiss under the clear blue sky, with the gentle waves of the ocean offering their blessings to their love. After the wedding, Catherine and David began building a happy family together. She continued working, but this time alongside David, no longer driven by schemes or revenge, only trust and genuine love. On the day Catherine gave birth to their first child, David never left her side. When their baby's first cries echoed through the room, he looked down at his son in his arms, tears filling his eyes. "Catherine, our baby." His voice trembled with emotion. She looked at him and smiled. "Our little family." They held each other close, knowing that everything they had been through had been worth it. The pain, the mistakes, they had all become valuable lessons, helping them cherish the present more than ever. Catherine had once lived in hatred, letting the past haunt her and lead her astray. But thanks to David, she learned that love has the power to overcome everything. No one can change the past, but forgiveness and understanding can pave the way for a brighter future. And in the end, true love helped them overcome all obstacles, allowing them to start a new life together, a life filled with love, family, and complete peace. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Dubai is renowned for its glittering skyscrapers under the sun and bustling streets filled with luxury vehicles. Yet just a short distance from the city center, the land transforms into an endless desert where the winds and sand reign supreme, capable of swallowing everything with the force of nature. Adrian Cole, the young CEO of the tech conglomerate Coltech, had no idea that this trip would become the turning point of his life. Adrian sat in the armored off-road vehicle, his sharp eyes scanning the view through the window. The sky gradually turned a shade of amber, a sign of impending weather change. "A sandstorm is coming," the local driver said nervously. Adrian, dressed in a flawless suit, merely frowned. His meticulously planned schedule for an important meeting left no room for unexpected interruptions like a sandstorm. "So what if the storm comes?" Adrian asked coldly. He disliked anything that could disrupt his plans. "We need to find shelter immediately. Out here, a sandstorm can make everything disappear within minutes." The vehicle sped up along the sandy path, But within moments, the sky began to darken. Sand particles were whipped into the air, forming violent whirlwinds. In no time, everything outside the vehicle's window turned into a blurry golden haze. The wind howled and waves of sand pounded against the car, making everyone inside feel as though they were trapped by the fury of nature. "We're lost," the driver exclaimed, his voice trembling. Adrian didn't respond. He could sense the chaos, but his survival instincts quickly kicked in. "Stay calm. Find a way out of here." But the storm left them no chance. The vehicle became stuck in the sinking sands, and every effort to free it proved futile. Adrian gazed out the window, a rare feeling of helplessness washing over him. The sand seemed like an infinite curtain, obscuring any sign of life. "We need to leave this place," he decided, opening the car door despite the driver's protests. Adrian stepped out, the fierce wind nearly tearing at his expensive suit. Each step through the sand was a struggle, but Adrian was not one to give up easily. He gradually moved away from the car, searching for a glimmer of hope in this desolate land. And then, like a miracle, he saw a light, a faint, flickering beacon in the midst of the swirling sands. Adrian gritted his teeth and made his way toward it. A lone house in the desert came into view, faintly outlined in Adrian's sight. It was a modest structure, built of sand-colored bricks, seemingly weathered by time and wind. But at that moment, it symbolized life, the only thing that could save him from the raging storm. Adrian knocked firmly on the old wooden door, the urgency in his pounding matching the frantic beat of his heart. The door opened and Adrian held his breath. Standing before him was a young woman with deep, enigmatic eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the desert itself. Zahra al-Hayek, a name he would later come to know, was draped in a long crimson scarf, striking against the harsh environment around her. "May I take shelter here?" "I'm lost in the storm," Adrian said, his voice hoarse from the wind and sand. Zahra studied him for a long moment, her gaze unreadable as if she were weighing her decision. Then, without a word, she gently opened the door wider. Inside the small house was a world entirely different from the barren wasteland outside. Handcrafted rugs adorned the floor, a small fireplace burned brightly in the corner, and the air was filled with the warm aroma of wood and spices. Adrian sat down, exhaling deeply as the warmth began to chase away the biting chill of the storm. "You should thank the storm," Zahra spoke for the first time, her voice gentle yet commanding. "Without it, you wouldn't have found this place." Adrian looked up at her. "And I wouldn't have found someone as kind as you." Zahra smiled faintly, but her eyes retained their distant, guarded look, like a veil hiding something deeper. "You should rest. The storm isn't over yet." Adrian remained still, observing the mysterious woman before him. Zahra was unlike any woman he had ever met. Her calm demeanor and the quiet strength she exuded behind her graceful exterior intrigued him. She didn't ask who he was, where he came from, or why he was there, and that only piqued Adrian's curiosity even more. That night, in the small house amidst the desert, under the howling winds and the icy gusts of sand, two people from entirely different worlds crossed paths. A meeting that seemed accidental, but was laced with destiny. Adrian had no idea that the moment he stepped through that door, his life would change forever. And Zahra, this enigmatic woman, would bring him not only survival, but also secrets he could never have imagined. Hello, Soul Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them. You're more than subscribers, you're family. Your presence means the world to me. Let's continue this journey together. Inside the small house in the heart of the desert, the fire in the hearth burned steadily, casting a warm glow that softly illuminated the quiet space. Adrian sat on a simple wooden chair, his sharp eyes scanning the room. There was nothing but the basics. An old wooden table, a small bookshelf holding a few worn books, and carefully woven handcrafted rugs. Zahra's house, though modest, exuded an air of elegance, a peculiar combination that piqued his curiosity about its owner. Zahra stood near the hearth, preparing a cup of tea with practiced, gentle movements. Her calm demeanor unsettled Adrian slightly. He was used to being met with admiration or deference from others, yet here he was, being ignored so nonchalantly. His pride flared. "Do you live here alone?" Adrian asked, his voice deep and authoritative. Zara turned to face him, her eyes meeting his directly. There was no fear or hesitation, only a frank gaze that seemed to weigh each word he had just spoken. "Yes, alone," she replied evenly. "Not afraid?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, as if testing her reaction. "What's scarier, living alone or living with people who aren't worthy of your presence?" Zara retorted, her words sharp and unfiltered. Adrian stiffened, surprised by her reply. No one had ever spoken to him like that, direct and without an ounce of reverence. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Adrian asked, a smirk tugging at his lips. He was accustomed to people recognizing his name and reputation, but Zara was different. "I don't need to know," Zara replied immediately, ignoring the hint of arrogance in his expression. "Your fame or wealth means nothing here. In this desert, you're just a lost man in need of help." Adrian felt as though he'd been dealt an unexpected blow. For the first time in years, he felt small and uncertain. Yet at the same time, her response only made him more determined to understand the woman before him. Their conversation didn't end there. Zara brought Adrian a cup of hot tea, and they sat across from each other by the fire. The flickering flames danced across their faces, warming the space while adding a subtle tension to the air. "Why would someone like you choose to live here, in the middle of the desert? Don't you feel lonely?" Adrian asked, his tone softening slightly, carrying a genuine curiosity. Zara chuckled faintly, her gaze drifting to the fire. "What is loneliness? Sometimes I think being surrounded by people who don't understand you is the real loneliness. Out here, I'm free. The desert doesn't judge, nor does it demand anything." Adrian fell silent. He couldn't deny that Zara's words touched something deep within him, a part of himself he had long buried. As a powerful CEO, he was constantly surrounded by people eager to win his favor, yet none of them truly understood him. The loneliness Zara described was something he knew all too well. "And what about you, Adrian Cole?" Zara asked, her voice calm but laced with depth. "A man like you, who has everything in his hands. Why are you in the middle of a sandstorm?" Adrian looked at her, momentarily at a loss for words. "Work," he answered curtly. "I came here for an important meeting." "Work so important that you're willing to risk your life for it?" Zara raised an eyebrow, her tone edged with subtle mockery. Adrian chuckled dryly. "In my world, if you don't keep running, you get left behind. I don't have a choice." Zara was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "Perhaps the problem isn't the world you live in, but the way you choose to live in it." After a while, Zara noticed Adrian moving with difficulty. She focused on a scratch on his arm, the dried blood leaving a reddish stain on his crisp white shirt. "You're injured," she said, her voice filled with a sense of responsibility. "Let me take a look." Adrian hesitated briefly, but eventually allowed Zara to examine him. She brought out a simple first aid kit and carefully cleaned and bandaged his wound. Adrian watched her work, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. He wasn't used to accepting help, but Zara's gentle care brought him an unfamiliar sense of reassurance. "You're really good at this," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "You're like a doctor." Zara chuckled softly. "Not quite, but I've learned to take care of myself. In the desert, if you don't know the basics, you won't survive for long." "You're stronger than I thought," Adrian admitted. Zara lifted her head to meet his gaze, her eyes glinting with a curious light. "Because I have to be. Everyone has to find their own way to survive." As night fell, the desert sky unfolded a magical scene. Thousands of stars shimmered against the velvet black sky, creating an extraordinary sense of peace. Zara led Adrian outside, where the tranquility of the desert could be felt more acutely. "It's so different here," Adrian sighed, for the first time letting go of the tension within him. "More peaceful than anywhere I've ever been." Zara smiled. "The desert has its own way of making people reflect on themselves." They sat together on a rug spread over the sand, the space between them feeling smaller with each passing moment. Adrian opened up about his hectic life, the pressures, the monumental decisions he had to make every day. and even the losses he had always kept hidden. Zara listened without judgment, simply being there as a companion in the quiet night. In return, Zara shared her own story about losing her family after an economic collapse and the years she spent learning to fend for herself in the harsh desert. Her story made Adrian realize that beneath her tough exterior was a heart that had endured immense pain. Amidst the stillness of the desert, in the glow of the starry sky, an unspoken bond began to form between them. Neither of them voiced it, but both Adrian and Zara could feel it, something deeply natural, deeply human. When Adrian returned to the small house, he couldn't stop thinking about the enigmatic woman who had made him forget his usual calculations, even if just for a moment. Zara, with her strength and depth, had not only saved him from the storm but also awakened a part of him he thought he had lost. That night, in the vast desert expanse, two lost souls found each other in the fleeting yet profound moment of destiny. The bright sunlight streamed through the small gaps in the windows, illuminating the modest interior of the house. Adrian woke up, feeling the stillness around him. Yet there was a lingering unease in his heart, a sense that the woman who had saved him, Zara Al-Hayek, was no mere stranger living in the desert. Zara had left the house early, leaving Adrian alone. While waiting for her return, he decided to take a closer look around the small home. The simple yet refined furnishings reflected the meticulous nature of its owner. But what caught his attention the most was a loosely locked drawer near the bookshelf. Curiosity got the better of him, and Adrian pulled it open. Inside, he found an old photograph and a yellowed stack of documents. In the photo, a young and radiant Zara stood beside her parents, a commanding man and a gentle woman. At the bottom of the photograph, a caption read, "The Al-Hayek Family, 2014. Adrian immediately recognized the name Al-Hayek. It was one of the largest conglomerates in the Middle East, often mentioned in business reports as a symbol of success. But a few years ago, the name had vanished after a catastrophic bankruptcy. The accompanying documents contained financial records and newspaper clippings detailing the downfall of the Al-Hayek Group. One headline stood out, "Economic Disaster. Al-Hayek Group acquired by a multinational tech corporation." Adrian frowned as he read on. The records revealed that the Al-Hayek Group had been taken over in a hostile acquisition by a foreign corporation. The family lost all their assets, leading to the collapse of thousands of jobs in the region. Adrian felt a growing sense of familiarity with the details, as though he had seen them before in Coltech's internal reports. When Zara returned, Adrian was sitting silently, the stack of documents in his hands. As she stepped inside, her eyes immediately landed on the open drawer. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice sharp, clearly displeased to see Adrian going through her belongings. Adrian stood up, holding up the photograph. "Zara, who are you really? And why is your family connected to the Al-Hayek Group?" Zara froze for a moment, her eyes betraying a flicker of unease before hardening into resolve. She stepped forward, took the photograph from him, and sighed deeply. "If you found this, I won't hide it anymore," she said, her voice dropping, each word feeling like a cut to her soul. "My father, Tariq Al-Hayek, was the founder and head of the Al-Hayek Group, one of the largest conglomerates in the region, but it all fell apart. In just one night, my family's company was taken over in a hostile acquisition by a multinational corporation. They took everything, the assets, the shares, even our dignity." Adrian stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "To my father, the company wasn't just wealth, it was his lifeblood. Losing it meant losing everything he had built his life around. He died just months after that, leaving my mother and me behind. But my mother couldn't bear the pressure either. She left me, and I had to fend for myself amidst the ruins. I moved here to get as far away as possible from the world that destroyed my family." Zara looked directly into Adrian's eyes, her gaze piercing through him. "I don't need to know who you are, but I've sworn never to trust those who stand on money and power to trample over others." Adrian felt a wave of unease washing over him as he listened to Zara's story. He began to comb through his memory, recalling the major acquisitions his company had made. One name surfaced in his mind: Al-Hayek Group. Taking a deep breath, Adrian spoke, his voice hoarse. "Zara, do you know which company acquired Al-Hayek?" Zara narrowed her eyes, studying him carefully. A large tech corporation from the US. But why are you asking? Adrian stood frozen. Zara, I think that company was Coltech. My company. The air in the room grew tense, taut like a string about to snap. Zara's eyes widened, a mix of shock and anger flashing in her gaze. What did you just say? Her voice trembled. Zara, I didn't know about this, Adrian quickly tried to explain. I wasn't directly involved in the acquisition. It was part of a market expansion strategy, and I left the handling to my team. Zara let out a bitter laugh. Didn't know? Do you think saying I didn't know erases your guilt? Do you have any idea that your company's decisions destroyed an entire family, an entire community? My father is dead, my mother left me, and I've been exiled here, all because people like you wanted to make more profit. Adrian lowered his head, unable to respond. Zara's accusations struck him like sharp blades to his soul. He couldn't deny that he was part of the system that had caused her pain, even if he hadn't made the decision himself. Zara, I'm sorry, he said, his voice heavy with remorse. If I had known what happened, I wouldn't have let it happen. I want to do something to make it right. Make it right, Zara scoffed, her tone icy. Do you think your apology can change anything? You can't bring back my father. You can't undo the losses you've caused. Zara turned and left the house in anger. Adrian stood motionless, feeling trapped in an emotional storm with no escape. For the first time in his life, he realized that the power and responsibility his position brought were not just privileges, but also a heavy burden. He couldn't ignore this truth, nor could he turn a blind eye to Zara's pain. But how could he make amends to someone who had lost everything because of the decisions made by his corporation? Adrian knew that to regain Zara's trust, he needed to do far more than just apologize. But could the fact that he represented everything she despised ever be reconciled? Or would the desert remain a chasm between two people from completely different worlds? Adrian stood silently in the small house, his gaze fixed on the door Zara had just walked out of. Her cold words and fiery eyes lingered in his mind. For the first time in his life, he felt the wealth and power he possessed shrink into something insignificant and meaningless. Zara, the strong and resilient woman, had forced him to face a harsh reality. The decisions he had unknowingly approved had caused far more serious consequences than he had ever imagined. Adrian sat down on the chair, picking up the family photo of Zara on the table. In the picture, Zara smiled brightly, standing beside her parents, a happy family full of hope and dreams. This was a completely different Zara from the enigmatic and strong woman he had met in the desert. She was once a naive girl who had the whole world in her hands before it was all taken away. He wondered how he, a CEO so proud of building his company on transparency and responsibility, could have let this happen. The acquisition of Al Hayek Group, which he had heard mentioned, was just one of hundreds of major deals his company carried out each year. But now he realized that behind the numbers in the reports were real people, lives destroyed by decisions that had seemed like mere paperwork. How could I not have known, Adrian muttered, blaming himself. He felt guilty but couldn't deny the fact that he hadn't paid enough attention to the consequences of his team's actions. Later that evening, Zara returned, carrying a small bundle of firewood to keep the hearth going. She walked straight into the house, deliberately ignoring Adrian's presence, but he wouldn't let her. Zara, wait, Adrian called out, his voice filled with remorse. I need to talk to you. Zara stopped, her eyes cold as she turned to look at him. Speak, but I doubt there's anything you can say that will change my mind. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes full of sincerity. I truly didn't know this had happened. When I approved the acquisition, all I received were reports describing it as a major business opportunity. No one told me about the consequences it had for your family. Zara laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade. You think not knowing absolves you of guilt? Adrian, you're the CEO. You're responsible for everything that happens under your authority. You can't simply blame your subordinates. You're right, Adrian admitted, his voice heavy. I can't undo what happened, but I can do something to make amends. Zara shook her head, her eyes filled with exhaustion and disappointment. Adrian, you may be able to make amends to me, but what about my father? What about the other families who lost everything because of your decisions? You can't bring them back. Don't tell me you want to fix things because nothing can fix what's already happened. Her words hit Adrian like a hammer, each one a sharp reminder of the weight of his actions. He stood there, struggling with the enormity of the pain and loss he now realized he had contributed to. Yet despite Zara's rejection, a seed of determination began to grow within him, a resolve to prove that actions could speak louder than words, even in the face of the seemingly irreparable. Zara stepped to the fireplace, adding more wood to the flames, avoiding Adrian's gaze as much as she could. But in the end, she could no longer suppress the emotions welling up inside her. "Do you know what I've lost?" she said, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "My father was everything to me. He taught me how to be strong, how to face life's challenges. When he died, it felt like my entire world collapsed." She turned to face Adrian, tears shimmering in her deep, expressive eyes. "You've never felt that, have you? You've never known what it's like to lose everything that matters most to you because of someone else's greed." Adrian stood frozen. Zara was right. He had never experienced loss like hers. While his work brought him stress and countless challenges, he had always had everything within his grasp: power, wealth, and respect. Yet standing before Zara, he felt like a failure. "Zara, I can't claim to fully understand your pain," Adrian said sincerely, his voice soft. "But I can tell you that I admire you. Despite losing everything, you've stayed strong, surviving in a place as harsh as this. You've made me realize that all the things I have, money, power, mean nothing if I don't use them the right way." Zara's fiery anger seemed to fade slightly as she looked at him. "If you truly feel that way, prove it with actions, not words." Adrian nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I will, Zara. Not just for you, but for everyone who's suffered because of my company. I promise." That night, the two sat by the fire, no longer exchanging accusations or arguments. Zara shared more about her family, about the happy memories with her parents before everything fell apart. Adrian listened attentively, feeling her pain deeply with every word she spoke. As Zara gazed up at the star-filled sky through the window, she said softly, "The desert is the only place where I can find peace. It doesn't judge, doesn't demand anything. It's just me and nature." Adrian nodded, for the first time truly understanding the stillness of the desert that Zara cherished. "You may find peace here, but you deserve a better life, Zara. A life where you don't have to run from your past." Zara didn't reply, remaining silent. But in her eyes, Adrian glimpsed a faint glimmer of hope. Fragile, yet still present. And in that moment, he silently vowed to himself that he would do everything in his power to nurture and protect that hope, to make amends for everything she had lost. The blazing sun illuminated the vast desert as Adrian left Zara's small house to return to the city. His heart felt heavy, not only because of Zara's anger and disappointment, but because he had come to the painful realization that he had unwittingly contributed to her suffering and that of countless others. He understood that mere apologies would never suffice. Only actions could make a difference. Adrian resolved that he would not let his promise fade into the desert winds. It was time to act, to make things right, no matter the cost. Returning to the top-floor office of Coltex headquarters, Adrian no longer looked at it with the same pride as before. The gleaming glass walls and modern interior now felt foreign to him. This corporation, his brainchild, had been built on decisions he hadn't fully understood. He immediately convened a meeting with the senior leadership team. Adrian demanded a thorough review of all files related to the Al Hayek Group acquisition and similar projects. Over the next few days, dark secrets he had never been aware of began to emerge. Reports from the internal audit team revealed that the Middle East branch had used unethical methods to achieve their objectives. They had deliberately exerted financial pressure on Al Hayek Group, exploiting their vulnerabilities during an economic downturn to acquire the company at a bargain price. Worse still, after gaining control, the branch laid off thousands of employees without offering any compensation, leading to the collapse of entire communities. Adrian was furious, not just with those who had orchestrated the events, but also with himself. He had placed too much trust in his team, too preoccupied with growth targets to see the damage they were causing in his name. The next day, Adrian made a bold decision. He dismissed everyone responsible for the Al Hayek acquisition, including senior executives from the Middle East branch. Furthermore, he committed to establishing a new ethics oversight committee to ensure that all of Coltech's business operations would prioritize people and communities above profit. In a company-wide address, Adrian candidly admitted the corporation's mistakes. "We have made grave errors by prioritizing profit over people," he said, his voice steady but resolute. "From this day forward, Coltech will not just be a tech company. We will become a symbol of responsibility, humanity, and fairness. And I pledge that every decision from now on will align with that mission." Despite starting this journey to reform the company, Adrian's mind remained preoccupied with one person. Zara, the woman with her strength and frankness, had forced him to confront the truth and change himself. But as he thought about the way he had left, with an apology she had refused to accept, Adrian knew there was one responsibility he had yet to fulfill. He returned to the desert, hoping to see Zara one more time. After days of traveling, his off-road vehicle finally reached the small house where they had first met. But when he entered, the house was empty. Zara had gone. Adrian looked around, feeling the emptiness of the space. The handcrafted rugs, the old books, and the gentle glow of the hearth were all gone. Zara had taken everything with her, as if she had never been there at all. Adrian stood in silence for a long time, his heart heavy. But then he realized that even though Zara was no longer there, he could still do something to prove his remorse. He sat at the old wooden table and wrote a letter. "Zara, I know you may never forgive me, but I want you to know that you have changed my life. You've helped me see the things I once willfully ignored. I've begun to correct the mistakes I've made. I've dismissed those responsible for the Al Hayek acquisition and committed to supporting the communities impacted by our actions. This isn't just for you, it's for everyone who has suffered the way you have. But without you, I would have never realized this. I hope that one day when I've done something truly worthy, you'll see that your sacrifice wasn't in vain. If you ever need me, no matter where, I'll always be here. Adrian." Adrian left the letter on the table and walked out of the house. Before leaving, he reached out to non-governmental organizations in the region, pledging funding for reconstruction projects in the communities affected by Coltech. He began establishing scholarships and economic support programs to help people like Zara, those who had been abandoned in the relentless pursuit of profit. As Adrian's vehicle pulled away from the small house, he glanced back through the rearview mirror, feeling as though he had left a piece of himself behind. Yet he also carried a newfound sense of hope. Hope that his efforts would not only transform his company, but also provide opportunities for those whose lives had been shattered by past mistakes. Though Zara was no longer there, Adrian knew his journey had only just begun, and he resolved to keep going, not just to atone for his errors, but to build a better future, one that Zara and others like her could one day be proud of. Are you still following the story? Let us know your thoughts about it. Your feedback means the world to us. The sun dipped closer to the horizon, casting a warm amber hue over the desert. A gentle breeze swept across the dunes, carrying the unique stillness of the vast expanse. Zara returned to her small house after weeks spent supporting a distant community. With a bag of supplies slung over her shoulder, she entered her home, feeling the familiar comfort of the space, but unaware of the profound change awaiting her. As she placed the bag on the table, her eyes landed on a neatly folded piece of paper resting on the wooden surface. It was the only thing out of place in the house she had left vacant for so long. On the outside of the envelope was handwriting she recognized immediately. Zara. She opened the letter, and as she read the first few lines, her heart seemed to pause. Zara read each word slowly, as though afraid she might miss something if she rushed. Adrian's words carried a weight of regret, gratitude, and sincerity she hadn't encountered before. She placed the letter down, her gaze lingering on the final line. "I hope that one day when I've done something truly worthy, you'll see that your sacrifice wasn't in vain." Zara exhaled deeply. The anger she had held on to for so long now softened. In Adrian's words, she no longer saw a wealthy man trying to justify himself, but a person genuinely striving to make amends for his wrongs. Not long after, Zara ran into an old acquaintance from the international aid organization she had once worked with. As they talked, her acquaintance brought up Koltek, a name Zara thought she would never want to hear again. Did you know, Zara? Their CEO, Adrian Cole, has done something remarkable. They recently funded a large-scale resettlement program in the Middle East. He didn't just send money, he personally visited the affected areas and met with families. He's genuinely trying to right the wrongs of his company's past. Zara froze, disbelief flickering in her eyes. Adrian went there himself? She asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Yes, the acquaintance nodded. He seems truly committed to changing the way his company operates. Zara, he's not just making empty promises. He's actually doing good work. Those words felt like the final push Zara needed. She could no longer ignore the stirrings in her heart. She knew it was time to confront the emotions she had left unresolved. The stage was set for Zara's next step, one that would finally allow her to face Adrian and the weight of their shared history. Would she be able to reconcile the man he was with, the man he was becoming? Only time and courage would tell. 6 months later, the light of Adrian's transformation had reached even the most remote corners, including the place where Zara lived. She heard his name mentioned in a speech shared by a local charity. From the image of a cold and distant CEO, Adrian now appeared as a man driven by sincerity and a newfound mission, to use his power to bring good into the world. One day, Zara received an invitation to a major charity event hosted by an international organization in London. Upon seeing Adrian's name listed as the keynote speaker, she knew she had to attend. The event was held in a grand theater, with hundreds of guests from around the world in attendance. Zara sat quietly in one of the back rows, observing as Adrian stepped onto the stage. He was no longer the arrogant, detached man she had first met. Adrian now spoke with sincerity, his voice resonating with genuine emotion. "We often think success is measured by numbers," Adrian said, "but the truth is, it's measured by the hearts we touch. I have made mistakes, but I've come to realize that it's never too late to change and to make amends." Zara felt the honesty in every word. As he stepped off the stage, she made her way toward him, her heart beating faster with every step. Adrian froze when he saw her, his eyes widening in surprise. "Zara?" "Hello, Adrian," she said with a gentle smile, her voice soft yet full of meaning. "I see you're doing wonderful things." Adrian smiled back, a kind of smile she had never seen from him before, one of relief and genuine happiness. "Thank you for coming. I always hoped that one day you would see what I've been trying to do." Zara nodded. "I see your change, Adrian, and I believe you're truly sincere." After the event, Adrian invited Zara to join him in his charitable projects. At first she hesitated, but eventually she agreed, wanting to see for herself if he truly was the man he appeared to be. They started with small projects, building schools, organizing food donation drives, and providing financial aid to communities affected by past corporate actions. Gradually, Zara realized that Adrian wasn't just changing himself, but also transforming the way he viewed power and responsibility. During each trip, Adrian took the time to listen to the stories of people whose lives he had inadvertently impacted. Those moments of vulnerability and connection allowed Zara to see the sincerity in him. She witnessed his relentless efforts to make things right, and slowly the wounds she carried began to heal. As for Adrian, he increasingly recognized that Zara was the person who had inspired his transformation, not only through her powerful words, but through the way she lived, resilient, compassionate, and always thinking of others. Together they began to forge a new path, one built not on guilt, but on hope, understanding, and the shared desire to bring meaning to their lives and to those they touched. On a trip to a small village in the Middle East, once the heart of the Al Hayek Empire, Adrian and Zara hosted a ceremony to inaugurate a new school. The school, built with funds from Adrian's foundation, was named Tariq Al Hayek to honor Zara's late father. As the ceremony concluded, the brilliant hues of the desert sunset painted the horizon. Standing beneath the golden sky, Adrian gently took Zara's hand. "Zara," he said, his voice warm and sincere, "you've taught me the true meaning of strength and love. You've shown me that power only has value when it's used to help others. I can't change the past, but I want to build the future with you." Adrian knelt down, producing a simple yet elegant ring. "Zara, will you give me the chance to love and protect you, to build a meaningful life with you each day? Zara looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears of happiness. Adrian, I can't promise that everything will be easy, but I'm ready to take this journey with you. Adrian smiled, a sense of relief and joy flooding over him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and beneath the vast desert sky, they embraced for the first time as two people ready to step into the future together. After that day, Zara and Adrian became not just partners in their charitable endeavors, but also companions in life. Together, they expanded their programs, reaching more communities and inspiring others with their story. Their love became more than a personal connection. It became a symbol of redemption, forgiveness, and humanity. Under the light of the changes they brought, Adrian and Zara proved that no one is beyond transformation, as long as they have the courage to face their mistakes and begin again. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.